From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. How do our children benefit from being outdoors? How can we help our body know that the coast is clear and we're in a safe space to heal? And how can strength training help us avoid the diseases of aging, like obesity, cancer, and diabetes? This is episode 507, and this is our end-of-year gift to you, an episode sampler of sorts, with excerpts from the most popular Wise Traditions podcast episodes of the year. On today's episode, you'll hear from Ginny Yurich, Dr. Olivia Lesslar, and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, whose interviews were the listener favorites in 2024. We'll start with a segment from episode 458, Get Your Kids Outside with Ginny Yurich. She is the founder of 1,000 Hours Outside, and she covers how our kids' physical well-being and cognitive and emotional health, creativity, and social skills all improve from time outdoors. Before we get the ball rolling, why don't you give your family a gift of the Weston A. Price Foundation book on 11 healthy traditional dietary principles. This book gives an overview of how to eat more ancestrally today. There's something in each chapter that you can implement for better health. So get your copy now. It's only $10 or $5 if you place a bulk order of 10 or more. So maybe you could spring for a copy for each member of your entire extended family. Either way, go to westonaprice.org and click on the Order Material button on the homepage to find this new 11 Principles book. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Okay, so we're kicking off with excerpt number 1 from episode 458, Get Your Kids Outside with Ginny Yurich. Enjoy.
Kids are not outside anymore. And they're not naturally in the neighborhood. There's a fantastic book by a man named Mike Lanza named Playborhood, where he talks about how your neighborhood is dull and boring. And when generations past looked out their window, there were other kids playing, and that would entice them out. And that just does not exist anymore. The whole shift in society has moved inside. And so when a kid's trying to decide what to do, he says there's 100% chance that something's going to be on TV. There's 100% chance that something new is going to be on their social media app. But there's sometimes a 0% chance that there's going to be another kid outside. And so what we're doing is we are being intentional about getting our kids outside. And often that looks like making plans with other families, because that is really the most enticing thing for a child, is to have someone else to play with. And it's a little bit extra work. It's definitely different than how it used to be. But it's very worth it for the family unit as a whole, because I think as parents, we need that outside time and that green time just as much as our kids do, because we're immersed in this technological world too.
Yes, I often say more is caught than taught. First of all, we need to model it, right? And it's good for us as well. But tell me this, is it true that on average we spend 4 to 7 minutes outside each day? 4 to 7 minutes outside each day and 4 to 7 hours on our screens?
Yes, it's a huge imbalance. That's the issue. And we are not anti-screen. We are just about bringing back balance, because kids need this. I mean, that's a fact. It is well researched that kids and adults, but especially kids for this developmental period, they need it for their cognition, for the way their brains are wired. They need it for their emotional respite. They need it for their social skills to practice coming up with something out of nothing, being creative, negotiating rules for pickup sports and all that kind of stuff. And they need it for their physical bodies. I mean, we're talking about their bone structure. We're talking about exposure to sunlight, vitamin D. We're talking about their body rhythms. I love seeing, you're up in the morning. You're up in the morning in your tank top and it's 20 degrees outside. But this is really important for our children's development. And what we're seeing is a mess. Kids are struggling. And this is one of the main reasons why.
Wow, I didn't realize this until you started talking, Ginny. I remember when my husband and I were youth group leaders, and we took the kids on a retreat, and this young man was running through a field. He got his feet somehow stuck in a little pothole in the field, and he broke both of his legs. And I was puzzled as to why, until now I'm realizing he spent most of his time inside. He probably didn't have the bone density, not to mention that his diet was probably nutrient poor. But I didn't think of it until now that he wasn't used to moving around, really.
Well, so kids need load-bearing exercises, and so do adults. One of the things that I've learned about in the past couple of years is just carrying weight. So if you're a parent and you're going to go on a hike with your kid, put a little extra weight on your back because that's going to help with your bone density. But one of the things that Katie Bowman talks about, she's one of my favorites from Nutritious Movement, and she's got great books, but she says osteoporosis is a childhood disease that shows up in adulthood because childhood kids are meant to jump and land. And that's what they do naturally. Like my kids, even my teens, they're constantly jumping up onto things. Can they get up higher? They call it box jump, and they're trying to jump off and then they jump off. And every time they land, that is strengthening their skeletal system, that impact. And so we have kids that are sitting, and they say kids are sitting 6 hours a day. I mean, just most of childhood has become sitting for schoolwork, sitting to drive to this extracurricular activity, and sitting for screens. And so kids are not getting that impact, those load-bearing activities. And each season, now here we are in the winter, so same with you, it's like in the 20s, each season offers new activities for load-bearing work. So for example, if you're in the winter and it's snowing and your kid's dragging a sled up a hill, that's heavy work, moving up through the snow and using their quadriceps. Or if they're shoveling, or if it's the middle of the summer and you have them carry a log for the campfire or something like that, nature provides these opportunities for kids and they're fun and they want to do them. And while they're doing them, it's helping them develop.
So I live in a city, and what if someone's not a homesteader, not a homeschooler, and being outside actually doesn't seem very safe? I can see why a parent would choose to have their kid play a video game or something indoors. How can we get them out when we're not in that scenario?
Well, I think we're back to the same thing. We got to go with them, or we have to send them with friends. And that depends on their age, obviously. But people ask this question a lot. Like, what if I live here and what if I live there? The answer really is that each place offers its own unique advantages and disadvantages. So there's a man named Dan Buettner who is with National Geographic, and he talks about people who live into their hundreds, a centenarians. And he says your ideal is to live in a walkable city so that you can walk to get your groceries and walk to get this or that. So he would really recommend a city. You're going to go out, you're going to walk to the restaurant, you're going to walk to the library, right? So you can do that if you live in a city, but you maybe don't have as much green space, or maybe you can't send your kid by themselves because there's all sorts of people out there and it doesn't feel safe. So you have this advantage, but a disadvantage. If you live in a suburb, maybe you've got a lot of neighborhood kids and your kid can go bike the neighborhood and there's going to be some other kids that they can go knock on the doors, but you don't have the library that you can walk to. You have to drive to that. You're not close enough. So advantages and disadvantages. If you live in the country and you're in a rural spot, you may have no neighbors. There's no other kids. And so there's not that piece, maybe you have animals, but there's not that piece of other children to entice your kids out. So you've got space to roam, but you don't have this neighborhood, this hubbub. My father-in-law grew up in a neighborhood where there was 72 kids on either side of the street, within like 6 houses or something.
Wow.
So, there's always something going on. There's always someone to play with. So if you live out in the country, you may not have that, but you have more space. So in each situation, there's something to be celebrated and there's a challenge. And so I think we look at what is it that we can do and just try and focus on that.
Yeah, I like that. At the same time, I want to go back to what you were saying at first. There is this kind of chasm now between virtual life and real life. And I've never seen a child throw a tantrum because he couldn't go outside, but I have seen toddlers get upset when their parents take the device away from them.
Yeah, dysregulated. There's a really good book about it. Oh gosh, the name is I love it. It's one of my favorite books about it. But she talks about how screen time dysregulates you. And so I'll send it to you so you can add it to the show notes.
Yes.
And so kids they're off. Their whole systems are off. And it's that flashing screen. And it's meant to kind of lull you into this zombie-like state. And so it is hard to come in and out of that. And I've noticed even with myself. So let's say we go to the park and I'm there with my kids and I bring a book, like a really good book, like it's a good story. It's so easy to pop in and out of that when kids are like, Mom, look at me, or I want to show you this, or they come over to have a conversation. But it is extremely difficult, I think, to pop in and out of a screen, even for an adult. You're just sucked in a different way. And kids are experiencing that too, I think, with a brain that's less developed and with, the frontal cortex and all of that stuff that's going on. And so it can really be hard for them, I think, to step in and out of transitions are hard anyway. Transitions are hard for kids no matter what. And so that's a really big transition when it's messed a little bit with their nervous system, their eyes, but there's a lot going on there. In fact, this author, who I can't think of what her name is, she said it's better for a kid to just watch like an old movie, one that's a little slower paced, than to have this interactive screen time. And it's almost like a misnomer. I would think, well, hey, it's better for my kid to be creating on this app, or it seems like it's less lazy. But she said, no, it's better for their system. She talks about like doing a reset. And during this reset, they don't do any interactive screens, but she does allow a movie now and then because it's not quite so jarring to the nervous system.
Oh, I see. And I can understand why a reset might be needed because many parents use the devices as babysitters. The episode I was talking about, the toddler throwing a tantrum, literally was at a soccer game. So I think one of the parents was on the field. The other parent was on the sidelines with his kid. And the kid wanted to be entertained, not by what the people were doing on the field and not by creative play, but by a device. So we're using it as a babysitter, and then the kid gets accustomed to it and becomes dysregulated, I imagine.
Yeah, I found the book. It's by Victoria Dunkley. She's a doctor. It's called Reset Your Child's Brain, a 4-week plan to end meltdowns, raise grades, and boost social skills. It's a phenomenal book because I really was confused on the topic of what type of screens should we be doing? And I just saw the same thing. I was sitting at a basketball game, and this little boy next to me, who couldn't have been more than 5, had the phone, and it was right up in his face. He was watching YouTube, and it was inappropriate. But it was a situation where I think his dad was a coach, and the grandma was watching the game. And so they did give it to him as a babysitter. But I thought, oh, you could be talking about so many different things. Whatever. It's like, I'm not going to interject myself. It's a tricky situation.
Yeah, it's not your business exactly, but you're observing what's happening. And you're right. I've heard that it's actually even bad for their vision because our ancestors were looking out at the horizon. It's bad for all of our vision, as you're saying, not just the children. They were looking at the horizon. They were changing the things. They were scanning the environment. And instead, we're all looking at devices within 6 inches of our face.
Yes. And it's 2-dimensional. So there's a whole piece there, too, that's also in that book by Victoria Dunkley. And Katie Bowman talks about it, too. She says, when we're inside, our eyes are always constricted. So there's a ciliary ring that goes around the eye. It's always constricted, like if you're lifting weights, like your bicep or something like that. And it's even constricted when you sleep. So this is flexed, this muscle around your eye is a ciliary ring. And the only time that it relaxes, the only time is when you have distance looking, like you said, like our ancestors, where you're seeing far. There's an opportunity to see far. And so we're seeing this major increase in nearsightedness. And I just read a book called Renegade Beauty by Nadine Artemis. And she was saying, kids, it's 3 hours. The ophthalmologists are saying it's 3 hours. And a lot of people are saying that kids need about 3 hours of time outside a day for that optimal growth and development for their bodies.
Listen to the entire episode with Ginny, episode 458, Get Your Kids Outside, via the link in the episode description. This is Hoda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Coming up, we'll hear from Dr. Olivia Lesslar. Olivia offers simple yet profound ways to let your body know it is safe to heal.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Smidge. True wellness starts with what you put in your body. That's why at Smidge, they are dedicated to crafting clean, small batch supplements with care and premium ingredients to perfectly complement the real food on your plate. Smidge was founded in response to GAPS and PANDAS families who needed specific custom supplements that were effective and gentle on their children's sensitive systems. They offer hypoallergenic probiotics tailored to your unique needs and digestive enzymes that support various diets. And they don't stop there. Their 100% real food vitamins and naturally derived minerals ensure that you're getting the critical nutrients that are tough to obtain, even from the healthiest diets. At Smidge, there are no synthetic vitamins, no additives, no common allergens, and absolutely no commercial overprocessing, just pure, essential nutrition. As a transparent, founder-owned and managed company, they're on a mission to change lives by restoring the body's balance and supporting its remarkable ability to heal itself. So start your journey to vibrant health with Smidge. Visit GetSmidge.com. That's GetSmidge.com and use the code WISE10 for 10% off your order today. Again, that's GetSmidge, GetSmidge.com, and the code WISE10 for 10% off your order. And Green Pasture Products. Green Pasture Products have fermented cod liver oil that is a superfood that contains real vitamins that your body can use. Real vitamins found in food are made up of many different compounds that act together to deliver nutrients to your body in a way that the body can understand and use. The oil that Green Pasture Products produces also contains a natural balance of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamins A and D, and these nutrients are readily absorbed and used in the body, which leads to a variety of oral and overall health benefits. Experience the difference of fermentation in fermented cod liver oil and concentrated butter oil. Fermentation is the method in which Green Pasture gently extracts the oil from the livers. Fermented food, as you know, mimics digestion from within, aiding the body's process of absorbing nutrients from whatever else you might eat. Green Pasture Products is a small family-owned company. They dedicate their time to creating nutrient-rich products for their family and yours, and they are committed to making a high-quality oil to nourish all of our bodies. So go to greenpasture.org today to learn more about their nutrient-rich products and use the code WISE for 10% off your next order. Exclusions may apply, and the offer ends July 1st, 2025. Again, that's greenpasture.org and the code WISE for 10% off your order. Keep in mind that exclusions may apply and that the offer ends on July 1st, 2025. This is Hoda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. And here is the excerpt from episode 464, Repair and Reset Your Body with Safety Signaling, with Dr. Olivia Lesslar. Help me and help the listener right now understand how we can start to maybe tune in more to our body so that we can feel safe and more in harmony with it, and seeing even these symptoms as perhaps a sign of the direction in which our body is trying to help us heal.
So I think that the medical fraternity has actually done quite a big disservice, because I feel that we are one of the people that have been stoking this idea that if a symptom needs to be quelled, a symptom needs to be cut out, needs to be burned, needs to be medicated. Because then we have fostered 3 generations of people that can no longer read those symptoms. They no longer see symptoms as a way for the body to communicate. They no longer see symptoms as the body trying its best. And in fact, I've started to look at symptoms as, oh, my body's working. Right? So, I mean, we'll probably get into it, but I used to be very sick. And when I started to see things differently, when I helped my patients not only try to dampen the threat signaling, but also to increase safety signaling, they do better. How do they do that? So threat signaling is going to be anything where obviously you don't feel safe. Okay. For some patients, that could be certain foods. Some certain foods are going to trigger them, whether it's oxalate heavy foods or histamine foods or whatever it is. But in context, right, you also have to see that a lot of the time, foods can trigger you because those threat signals are up, which is why patients with issues with digestion or whatever it is, they'll tell you it's worse when they're stressed. So then the corollary must be true. It's better when you're happy, when you're, safe or satisfied or whatever. So it's about understanding how to manipulate the entire situation. And the psychoneuroimmunology means that you can try and use behavioral sciences, you can use your psychology, you can use your hormones and so on and so forth. I mean, we're friends with lots of hormone doctors, right? And they talk about how all these other symptoms that you sometimes think aren't related to hormones get better with hormones. That's the whole point of having all these different push points. So trying to deal with the threat signals, whatever those may be. Increasing safety signals is actually very simple. Increasing safety signals is going back to evolutionary science, basically. There are 3 basic ones, and that's light, nutrients, and temperature. So from an evolutionary perspective, there are 5 threats: plague, famine, winter, predator, damage to your 8 senses. Because any issues with these 5 things are going to send you in high alert. So if you know that those 5 things can be a problem, feeding the safety of those 5 things is going to help you with the situation. So predator, for example, is anything where you feel unsafe, even anything that's going to spike your cortisol or your adrenaline. Losing your car keys, for example, right? So we know do some deep breathing, for example, or change your behavior. Know that you put your car keys in a particular place every time. Little things like that help to increase safety signaling. I always say to my patients, it's really important to get out into wide open spaces because only apex will do that. You don't care if another apex predator can see you from the hills. You're going to be in a wide open space, chest up, head up, arms open, palms out, right? Because you're not harboring a weapon or anything like that. And you use your head, moving it side to side with your eyes scanning the horizon. Because just the fact that you can look around for threats puts your nervous system at ease. The fact that you can look, can see, can hear, can touch, which is why when we wear shoes all the time, these sensory deprivation chambers, your brain doesn't get information from that which is always meant to be in contact with the ground. That sets a lot of people's nervous system on edge. The fact that we've always got our head down looking in one direction, i.e. our laptop or our phones, that also gets the nervous system really agitated. Because it's saying subconsciously, haven't looked around for a while. You haven't looked to see if there's a threat. Hello, hi, you haven't looked to see if there's a threat. So the very fact that you can turn your head puts the nervous system at ease. I actually have another index patient. He was already on edge with other things. He had some issues. And then he had to go into a neck brace for a little bit. And the neck brace completely broke him. He wound up with a panic attack because of it, and everything fell apart having the neck brace because he couldn't look around.
Wow.
Yeah, he even said when he put the neck brace on, his eyes kept darting backwards and forwards as if he was like a scared animal, right? He took the neck brace off, was able to move, and then that was the start of his healing journey.
Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. And so I want to apply some of the things you've said in terms of increasing my own safety signaling. And I wonder if there are other simple things, Olivia, that you've shared with your most complicated cases that might surprise the listener right now or me.
So I'll take a particular patient recently, and this is exactly the formula that I gave her. I wanted her to actually have more animal products. And in fact, I put her on a carnivore diet. Now, the reason being is because meat, carnivore, nose to tail, that's time of plenty. You are not in winter, right? You're not eating root vegetables. You're not, blah, blah, blah. You are in time of plenty. You're going to have very regular meals because the body loves circadian manifestations of whatever. Doesn't want to have to worry about that next meal. I mean, we're talking someone whose nervous system is on the brink, right? And so you can, take from this what you want. But in her case, I wanted her to eat like clockwork. So it's one less thing for the nervous system to think about, and it could redirect its energies into other things, right? So she's eating regularly. She was waking up at the exact same time. She was going to sleep at the exact same time, just taking away any of these sorts of stressors, right? She was exercising at the exact same time, and she wasn't doing hardcore aerobics, because I don't want your body to think in any way, shape or form that you are running from something or you're putting up a fight. So it was all very sort of more resistance and yoga and that kind of stuff. In her case, I wanted her to drink mineralized water. So my favorite is Vichy Catalan. So it's, it's got quite a high amount of natural lithium in it, for example. But the fact that you are able to somehow source good quality water means that it's not winter, right? Flowing water with life in it. I put her on some supplements, but I only put her on food-derived supplements, because that's important. Food-derived supplements carries with it, I feel, kind of like an energy to it, right? Your body recognizes it. And I know that some people will argue with that point, and that's fine too. I mean, I use synthetic supplements all the time, but in her case, I really just wanted to just get right back to basics. The prescription for her as well was to have a lot of intimacy, a lot of touching, just being held with someone that you have already made a vow with and trust in their room, which is meant to be their safe space as well. All the electronics were taken out of the room. You are not to be distracted. This is meant to be your haven. Her husband was very happy about that. So the prescription was intimacy, being held. Yeah. Oh, and also, of course, not just when to eat and what to eat, but how to eat. So to start every meal with gratitude. I mean, Christians have it right with the prayer, right? But making sure that you are preparing your body to receive nutrients. Because I believe that when you eat in a parasympathetic way, with gratitude, with enjoyment, with love. And that's why I'm not particularly fussy with other patients about whether or not they have alcohol or what they eat. Because when you eat in a parasympathetic way, I have seen patients do a lot better than patients who eat the perfect food, but they're, almost orthorexic about it. Oh, how many calories is this? And, this, that, and the other. Is it organic? Is it this? Is it that? And they get so riled up about that, they don't eat in a parasympathetic way. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's this particular patient's prescription.
It makes me think of Steve Jobs, the guy who was the head of Apple and started all that years ago. He used to only wear a black turtleneck and jeans. I think this was basically his uniform because he was trying to have one less decision that he had to make every day. It seems to me someone who feels off balance in any way could benefit from having these rhythms of how they're going to live, what they're going to eat, and what they're going to do, bring them a sense of safety and security.
Absolutely.
To listen to the entire episode, 464, Repair and Reset Your Body with Safety Signaling, click on the link in the episode description. Finally, batting cleanup is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon from episode 466, Build Muscle to Stay Strong and Live Long. Gabrielle gets specific about how movement primes the body, lowering inflammation and reducing the risks of cancer, diabetes, and obesity. She also shares her recommendations for exercises that promote optimal muscular health. A lot of us talk about the skin being the largest organ in the body, but we overlook the second largest. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the skin, it's really funny. We've heard, and this is human nature. We believe what we hear over and over again. We believe repetition rather than believing truth.
Talk to me.
Yeah. And skin is not the largest organ. Actually, it's skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is an organ system. And I highlight skeletal muscle for the listener or the viewer because there are other types of muscle, right? There's smooth muscle, there's muscle within the arteries, the uterus, cardiac muscle, but skeletal muscle is the muscle in the bicep or the quad, and it's muscle under voluntary control. And by the way, it makes up roughly 40% of an individual's body, making it the largest organ in the human body. Organ system, which is incredible.
So the skin is not. I guess I've been misinformed all these years. Why is the skin not, and why has it been perceived as being the largest organ?
I think just because of the surface area. Again, we have really been misguided in medicine. And one of the ways in which we've been misguided is we've really ignored skeletal muscle as an organ system. Skeletal muscle is always or typically thought about as it relates to exercise or sport performance or looking good, when in reality, there is nothing more critical to our health and wellness and to our longevity than the actual health of our skeletal muscle.
Okay, so let's get into it. How can we shore up the health of our skeletal muscle?
The way in which you do that, there's two main ways, and that is through exercise, movement, which we're going to talk all about, and diet.
Let's start with exercise because surprisingly, Gabrielle, on this Wise Traditions podcast, we haven't addressed movement much, though obviously it's a part of every culture since the beginning of time. We were made to move, right? So what do you know about the benefits of movement to muscle health? And are there specific movements and exercises that you would recommend?
I've thought about this quite a bit. And movement, I love that you said that. When we think about skeletal muscle as an organ system, we have to understand that exercising or in motion skeletal muscle, it does certain things. Again, why do we care about movement? We care about movement because when we contract skeletal muscle as an organ system secretes myokines. Myokines are little proteins that travel throughout the body. We look at the way skeletal muscle contracts, and again, it secretes these myokines, but exercising skeletal muscle also improves things like insulin sensitivity. We've all heard about these diseases of aging. They don't start later on. They start early with the health of our skeletal muscle. And ways in which we are inactive really have a tremendous effect. And what does that mean and why does that matter? There's no such thing as a healthy sedentary person. A healthy sedentary person doesn't exist. Walking, rucking, I think we should talk about rucking. I think we should talk about resistance exercise. All of these things impact the health of skeletal muscle.
I think you're right. I think even if we didn't know the science behind some of these things, when we are sedentary, when we're seated at our desks all day, and then we come home and we watch TV and we sit on the couch, when we have a sedentary lifestyle, we're riding around in our cars to get to and fro. We don't feel great. And we kind of know it, right? We know it deep inside. And it doesn't matter if the person who's being sedentary is thin, because it's not about appearance, as you mentioned earlier. It's about health.
Yes. I know you bring up a really good point. When an individual is sedentary, you don't necessarily feel the decrease in lipid oxidation, the decrease in glucose utilization. We don't feel that. It's not felt. When an individual is sedentary, skeletal muscle over time has what we call a decreased flux. So if we think about it really high level, we know that skeletal muscle is important. We know that movement is important because it's priming this organ system. Just like we exercise to have a healthy cardiovascular system, a healthy thyroid, endocrine system, we can't do much directly. But with skeletal muscle, we have direct control over that. And when an individual is inactive, it's not just that the skeletal muscle isn't contracting things or isn't releasing the things, but it also creates low levels of inflammation. It changes the actual tissue. For example, if healthy skeletal muscle looks like a fillet, I know that everyone on this podcast has probably eaten a fillet. Unhealthy skeletal muscle looks like a marbled ribeye steak. And this happens over time. And the thing is this is really where these disease processes start. My baseline recommendation, it's interesting. So they give these baseline recommendations of 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous activity, 2 days a week of resistance training. I think that we can go deeper. If we think about how humans were designed before we became domesticated, I think about what are the actions that we must take to maintain our independence. To me, it's not just going to the gym and getting on a machine, very helpful, but very specific things that I would tell people to do would be to carry things, whether you're carrying a kettlebell, whether you are carrying your children. I have 2 little children. You better believe I exercise with them. I strongly believe that that's probably what people used to do. They used to carry their kids on their back or carry their kids on their chest or carry their kids on their shoulder. And this can also be a form of exercise. This idea of just moving our body in a way that is very helpful, like rucking or throwing on a backpack, etc.
This makes so much sense. And I've seen this with my own eyes. So as you know, at the Weston A. Price Foundation, we value very much the research and work of Dr. Weston Price, who traveled the world in the 1930s, finding isolated indigenous people groups that were apart from modernity. And he recorded a lot about their diets. And then me and some other experiential anthropologists have started traveling the world kind of in his footsteps. And I've seen, Gabrielle, women carrying water jugs on their heads, right? So they don't need to go to a gym or do a rucksack thing, and wearing babies because they are incorporating this kind of movement and this kind of training that is so beneficial naturally as a part of their day in and day out lives. Whereas you and I that live in a more developed country or whatever, in a more modern lifestyle, have unfortunately defaulted to a more sedentary form of life where we have to be more intentional about our movement.
I would agree with that. We really do have to create a culture that balances the high technology culture that we have. I'm not against technology. We need it. Look, we get to do this. This is amazing.
Yes.
But also being very mindful that the influence that it has is one of extreme sedentary behavior. Is walking enough? I don't think it's enough. I do think thinking about movements that potentially, if we didn't have a car, we didn't have an elevator, and we didn't have pulleys and things to move things, what are the actions that we have to be able to do? We have to be able to get up off the floor. We have to be able to carry heavy things. We have to be able to push up heavy things, right? Lifting them. We have to be able to climb up, climb down. These are all actions that I think that we should incorporate into exercise that we often don't. I know that there's primal movement, etc., but really thinking about aging, thinking about balance, thinking about plyometrics. What happens when someone falls and breaks a hip? That typically really changes the trajectory of their life. And if we begin to really understand that skeletal muscle is the only organ system that we have direct control over, we can maintain power, we can maintain strength. And it's interesting because I think for an older individual, it's very difficult to overtrain. There's a lot of talk about rest and recovery. I don't feel that we are on that side of the spectrum. I think that we're on the side of the spectrum that we have a lot to do.
Oh, that's such a good word. What's coming to my mind right now is I've interviewed people about vitamin A and how critical that is for your overall well-being, hormonal health, and so forth. And people often share with me, oh, I'm concerned about vitamin A toxicity. And the issue is just like what you say, Gabrielle, we err on the side of too little vitamin A, not too much. So people are kind of concerned about something that may not apply at all.
I absolutely agree with you. We are robust humans. And I'll tell you this, and this is maybe a little more esoteric, but capacity is cultivated within the arena. Capacity is cultivated within the arena of life. We are designed to do hard things. We are designed to do hard physical and mental things. And the moment that we take away that opportunity and we self-impose a limiting opportunity, that's when everything changes. The moment we take ourselves out of the arena.
It's just that human nature is wanting to press that easy button, don't you think?
I don't. What I do think, and I'm so grateful that you mentioned that, I do believe that we have been taught that. We have been taught that stress is bad. We have been taught that there is fight or flight, and that's the only stress response. I have seen a lot of patients in my time, and there is also literature that there are other stress responses. And I don't want to go too far off, but I do mention this in the book. There's fight or flight, and that's just one stress response. There's also tend and befriend and the courage response. And what we believe and how we operate within our life will truly cultivate our response to stress and the meaning of stress.
I understand what you're referring to. It reminds me of the trend right now of cold adaptation or cold thermogenesis.
Yes, there you go.
It's a purposeful hormetic stressor because it has a fabulous result for the body. And so rather than just thinking, oh, my only options are jump out of the water screaming or freeze to death, there's something in between. And that's what you're referring to, I believe.
Yeah. So number one, we have to train our body. Even when you don't feel like it, it's a non-negotiable. You should be doing resistance training, whether it's 2 to 3 days a week, 4 days a week. There's multiple different ways to design a program. There are multiple different opportunities to experience that on the internet. It's easy. The other thing to do is utilize your body through rucking, throwing on a backpack. GoRuck has a great backpack, multiple different kinds of backpacks. Train with your children on your back. Figure out different ways to do it. Just do the uncomfortable and continue to do it because that's what your body needs. The other aspect to that is, could you do cardiovascular activity? There's a lot of discussion about zone 2 training. You could. Are there metabolic effects to that? Yes. And, or you could do some type of high intensity interval training. Again, there are multiple different protocols. You could do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. You could do a minute at a sub-maximal output, right? And then a minute or 2 minutes to fully recover. Martin Gabala at McMaster University talks all about this 1 minute workout, a lot of evidence behind it. Essentially, there are multiple ways to move the needle of muscle.
To listen to this episode in its entirety, that's podcast episode 466, Build Muscle to Stay Strong and Live Long, click on the link in this podcast episode's description. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Our guests today were Ginny Yurich, Dr. Olivia Lesslar, and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. Ginny's website is 1000hoursoutside.com. Olivia's website is drolivialesslar.com. And Gabrielle's is drgabriellelyon.com. And I am Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a podcast review from Apple Podcasts from Mrs. May. Love this podcast. I've been listening for years. They get better every year. Well, here's to 2025, Mrs. May, and thank you for your words of encouragement. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to each of you from me and the Weston A. Price Foundation family. And thank you for listening, my friends. Stay well, and remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit WestonAPrice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.